Worked at a high-profile kitchen. His exposure to different styles of cuisines, as well as his knowledge of modern and traditional techniques, give him a broad range of tools to utilize in his role as executive chef at Citizen Fox. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kevin Schuder.
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, I'm Kevin Schuder. I'm the chef at Citizen Fox. It's going to be a 120-seat vegan restaurant and brewery at 18th and Mission in San Francisco. We also do like little different catering events, different types of pop-ups, and this Wednesday we're actually opening up a sandwich shop, all-vegan sandwich shop at 7th and Market at a place called The Hall. So if you're interested in like a vegan French dip sandwich or a sort of jackfruit carnitas with fermented bell pepper and cabbage and carrot coleslaw, come on down. We're going to have soups as well as different sides. So let's get started. How many people have strong memories of food from childhood? Raise some hands. Okay, good. I have a few, Some of them are good even. And I guess the sense of smell is probably the scientists found that it's the sense that's most closely linked to our memory, which is kind of unusual. Like things you see or hear or taste or touch don't register as many memories as smells, which is very important in cooking. So when my family used to go out, which wasn't too often, we didn't eat together that much, but when we actually went out for breakfast, my dad would grab the menu and put on his reading glasses and scan it over with the seriousness of like a doctor looking over a hospital chart or something. And he was always going to say the same thing, even though he treated it like it was like life and death and dire, and be like, oh, they have the eggs Benedict. And he'd say it with this sort of gravitas. And he'd always order it without fail. And, if you ordered it too, you were in a secret club, like it was like a secret handshake or something. And so I guess I have a memory associated with eggs Benedict. And way, way, way back, long ago, I used to cook it for a restaurant. And, I appreciated the technique and the finesse that went into making it. But then you learn about the horrors of the egg industry and everything, and now you don't want to eat eggs Benedict anymore. So when we opened up for brunch at Citizen Fox, and we're open for brunch Sunday mornings and dinners Friday nights, soon to be open dinner 4 nights a week, by the way. I knew I definitely wanted a vegan Benedict to put on the menu. And so one of the most important things about it is the sauce. And I make a vegan Hollandaise, which I'll show to you today. That's probably one of the most important components you can have for it. So I guess let me tell you about it from the ground up. You start with English muffin. And I prefer to use one that's like kind of nice and yeasty and has lots of pockets, so it has a good texture. And then when you fry it up, it kind of has a nice crispiness that you sort of want. You don't want it to get soggy on you at all. And so after that, we make sort of like a sort of Canadian bacon Seitan. I actually have a Canadian make it for me, which is funny. Well, it's true. And I think the Seitan is pretty important in how we make it. A show of hands, how many of you really love the taste of water? Okay, a couple people. I like water. I drink it at least once a week, and we're made 90% of water, so I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't like it. But very often people make their Seitan with water, and I feel like it makes a lot more sense to use a really nice rich stock to make it, because all that flavor will be imparted into it. Way, way back in the day, I was the token white boy at a Japanese restaurant where they made dashi. And dashi is just really, really high in umami. I feel like a teacher in a classroom. A show of hands, students. How many of you know what umami is? All right. A lot of you. It's the fifth taste. And it basically, Sometimes you eat something and the flavor goes like this. Umami makes it go like this. It really stretches it out, and in Japanese it translates to tasty. Human beings are programmed, to crave it. We need amino acids for, our development, and umami is essentially like denatured amino acids. And so what I use for the dashi is a couple of unusual ingredients. The first one, I'm just going to ask you all questions. All right, kids, who can tell me what this is right here? Yes. Marie? Kombu. So this is higher in glutamates or umami than practically anything in the universe that we know of so far. And it's strange to think that seaweed could make a stock so rich and decadent, but it even though it's not necessarily imparting a taste, unless you boil it, which for very long, in which case it tastes seaweedy, it makes all the other flavors carry really far. So you're going to see on your little sheet, there's a recipe for the vegan dashi at the bottom of the page. And for that, we used the kombu, dried shiitake mushrooms, and another funny ingredient. This is Chinese fermented black beans. Now, all three of these ingredients have different types of amino acids, glutamates and guanolates. And so when you make a stock out of it, it's going to have like a really full, rich flavor. We use it in a lot of things at Citizen Fox. We use it in our burger. For our burger, we make a chickpea panisse as a binder, and then add in a tiny bit of gluten at the end for a chew. But rather than water to make a chickpea panisse, which is like a chickpea cake, we use the dashi. So I use it for soups, and I use it for the seitan too. So if you can source some of these ingredients, very often found in Asian supermarkets, it's really good to have on hand, and it freezes well. And I kind of feel like it's a secret weapon in vegan cooking. So for the seitan, gluten is obviously used a lot in vegan cuisine as a meat substitute and to bind things. And gluten also carries a really strong taste. Using the vegan dashi it doesn't mask the taste, but it really balances it. And so to also balance it, using a lot of really good spices and ingredients kind of helps season it so that it's not so much gluten, but a lot of spice and a lot of umami. And we actually slice it pretty thin as well, so it's not overly chewy. So I have some of it sliced here. We often do it on a deli slicer just to make it really nice and thin. And this is essentially your Canadian bacon, as I'll be cooking up for you later. But I feel like it's time to start cooking something. So let's start with the Hollandaise. So for quite a while, I was trying to figure out how to make a really kind of rich, creamy sauce that's vegan that can still stay warm. And, I tried all types of starches and different things. And the secret to this one is actually agar. Also used a lot in vegan cooking. How many of you cook with agar? All right. Quite a few. What I do with the agar is, when it's all finished, it's going to look really interesting. This is what Hollandaise looks like, ladies and gentlemen. Doesn't look too appetizing. It looks like a kind of, yellow jello right here. But what's going to happen is then you blend it. And so what I'm going to do is cook a batch of it for you. But then when I blend it and heat it, you're going to see how it can still keep that texture. I thought I was really clever in figuring this out back in the day. And then I worked at a kind of fancy sort of molecular gastronomy restaurant, and they did it all the time. So, maybe I'm not that clever. But if you want to look at the sheet for the Hollandaise recipe, we'll start with that. So it says a cup of oil. And I don't add all the oil at the beginning. What I do is I emulsify it into it at the end. But I use just enough to heat up the shallots and the garlic. And with the shallots and the garlic, I'm not trying to put color on them. I'm not trying to turn them brown or golden brown or anything like that, but just sweat them a little bit so that they become soft, but they don't take on like a strong seared flavor. So let me see how long it takes this thing to heat up here. And so for anything that's an egg substitute, there's another secret ingredient. We could even pass it around the classroom here. Where is that? I guess I don't know where it is. Oh, it's right here. Are many of you familiar with black salt? Well, I know you two are. Yeah. So black salt has a very kind of sulfuric smell to it that sort of kind of emulates eggs in a way. So we use it in our Tofu Scramble, but also in the Hollandaise, or anything where you kind of want that flavor. Do you want to grab it and pass it around a little bit? Little too much? No.
I can't smell it.
Oh, no? Oh. Okay. So it seems like this is heating up. So I just added maybe 3 tablespoons of oil. Just enough so that these don't stick to the pan. And here we have a cup of shallots that I'm going to add. Now it sounds like a cooking show. That was good. And very often I'll let the shallots go for a minute before I start to add the garlic, because garlic can burn really fast and then it takes on a bitter taste. And it's also cut smaller, so it's going to take less time to cook. All right. So while this is going, there's another component I like to add to this, which is Confit Tomatoes. So in testing out a Benedict, very often it's about texture, and it's about, you kind of want like a juicy pop to it, that people often have an egg yolk. Instead of doing that, very often I'll tempura fry avocados. So they take on a nice soft texture. But also, hey, look at that. Tomato confit right here. What I do is essentially, in this recipe, there's a certain way that it was done, and I've actually just changed it a week ago because we had a really good chef in, and he did it in a way that I hadn't seen before, and I really like it. Very often you'd cut the tomato, you'd put it upside down on the sheet, or on the pan, I guess, then drizzle olive oil and salt over it. Usually cook it at a really high temperature for a little bit, and then drop the temperature and let it go low and slow for a long time. And all the flavors will concentrate. What he did is he put them upside down, drizzled the olive oil and salt in them with little slivers of garlic, and basically kept the peel on the tomato. And so all the good stuff inside of the tomato, instead of leaking out, would stay in and concentrate. So you learn something new even after 10 years of cooking. Even Thomas Keller, the French Laundry, he does it the way I first described, and seeing this other chef do it a different way, I was like, why is he doing it that way? And I watched and just kind of wanted to know. And then I made sense of it in my brain, and I thought, wow, okay, maybe I'll start like that. The best way to know if it's good is to taste it. If the flavor's good, and if the texture's good, it's a good method. I grew up cooking on electric stoves, so, it's kind of a little bit of nostalgia here. All right. So I'll drop the temperature just a little bit. And I think it's okay to add the garlic now. That's not garlic. All right. There we go. So a lot of times when I add garlic to something, if I'm going to add a liquid ingredient, I like to have it ready in case the heat's really intense and the garlic starts to threaten to burn. But we're going to add some of the black salt as well. So in here I put a cup of shallots, a tablespoon of the minced garlic, and in here we have a tablespoon plus 2 teaspoons of the black salt. Sometimes it gets a little clumpy, so it's good to crush it up. And now it's wanting to stick, so it's time to add some of the other ingredients. Right here is a half a cup of rice vinegar. That sounded like a cooking show too, that was good. And we also have 2 cups of wine. And so when I cook with wine, not drinking it, but adding it to pans, it's good to have something that's unoaked if you're using a white wine. Like, generally, I often want a little bit more of a neutral flavor. Any characteristic in a wine that you have in there is going to really intensify as it reduces. So, let's say you accidentally open a bottle of corked wine. I don't know if you've ever had corked wine, but it smells like wet or moldy cardboard. You can't cook that flavor out. It's only going to intensify. So, a good thing to do is taste it, but it's not too sanitary for me to do that out of this. But if it has a good flavor, if it's a little bit more neutral, or if it has qualities that you would want to intensify for what you're cooking, then it's a good wine to use. So this is actually champagne from the restaurant that went flat. It was after a brunch service, and so that's often a really good cooking wine because it loses its bubbles, but it doesn't lose its flavor. So now I think I could turn it up a little bit. We have the good stuff in there, and it needs to reduce a little bit. And we also have a cup of soy milk. Not vanilla soy milk, just soy milk. Not pumpkin spice soy milk, just the regular stuff. All right. So while this is reducing, I could tell you about the tomato confit. So very often when I do it, if you do it with the cut side down, if you blast it with really high heat and then go lower and slower, you can, at the end of it, you can pick the skins off, which is what a lot of people want to do. I don't mind that little bit of texture, and so I kind of like the new way of doing it like this, but it's actually kind of fun. It'll like crinkle up like a dried up little burnt piece of paper, and you just pick the thing off. And it's actually a really good way to preserve tomatoes too. Like if you have a lot of tomatoes on hand and you're not sure what to do with them, they're going to go bad. They soak up a lot of the olive oil, and there's a lot of acidity and sweetness in there. So if you make confit out of them, they're going to last, they could last a week or two, possibly. And so for this, you also have a handy recipe there. Or is it? Uh-oh.
It does say sliced fried Roma tomatoes underneath the tofu scramble.
Oh.
Is that it?
Yes. This is from the restaurant cookbook, and so the cooks know how to do tomato confit. But basically, it's just as I described it to you. Is you want to use like a liberal amount of like good olive oil, and the tomato will actually like soak up the olive oil, and it almost becomes nice and preserved. Yeah, a good amount of oil and salt. You can start it at about 400 degrees for maybe like, maybe 10 minutes in the oven. And then I bring it way down to like 225 or, between 225 and 300, anywhere around there. If you're in a hurry, go 300. But if you have, a couple hours, you can turn it to 225 and just let it go for quite a while. It'll leach out a lot of the tomato juices, but then those juices will the water will evaporate out of it, and all the flavors will concentrate. And then the tomatoes, like sponges, will soak it back up. And any flavor you want to impart on it, you can. So a lot of times people will take like sprigs of thyme or rosemary and toss it in there, and all of that flavor is going to go into the tomato. So garlic works as well. So sorry that was not on there, but now you know. It's in your mind. You've heard it once. You'll never forget. So. All right. So that's the tomato confit. Yes, for the seitan, this is I never want to be shy with seasoning. Like I feel like a lot of vegan food, it relies very heavily on gluten, coconut oil. Like those two are some of the really, really big ones that you find. And it's kind of fun. It's sort of a personal challenge for me to get away from that a little bit. Oh, cashew's the other big one. It's in everything. But I still use a lot of cashew. But I really like to heavily season it, and the smoked paprika really helps. Canadian bacon is smoked, and so if you add the smoked paprika, it's most certainly going to impart that flavor. And the paprika part, I really like it sort of peppery. So, I heard your little bit about, a little liquid smoke, a little smoked paprika. I actually do that with the eggplant too. For this, I don't mind all the smoked paprika. So I use like a 1/4 cup to 3 cups of gluten. Like it's a significant amount. The coriander kind of helps give it a sort of seedy quality. The black pepper helps give it a little bit of heat. Fennel seed is so often found in like Italian sausages and stuff like that. So that's also a good component to add. And entirely for the liquid, I'll use the dashi after it's gone for a really long time and it's really concentrated. The recipe for the dashi I'll often have go for an hour and a half. It'll somewhat low temperature. If you boil it, it'll taste very seaweedy from the kombu. But if it's a little bit lower and slower, that'll also keep it from tasting like seaweed, but you'll still get all of the umami from the kombu. So adding the vegan dashi to the seitan, and some olive oil and soy sauce, it'll make like a really, really, really concentrated seitan. And so that's that. I was tempted to make seitan for you up here, but it would just be too much of a mess, All right. So for tofu scramble, I like to use a really good tofu, and very often Hodo Soy. It's a local Oakland company, and it's a little bit more expensive, but it's also very, very good. I was never as much a connoisseur of tofu until I worked at the Japanese restaurant, and they sold it a bowl of tofu with just like a pinch of salt, and people just ate it up. And it was so much about the texture that sold it. For a tofu scramble, I prefer to use like something that's a bit more firm, or you can use a little bit of the firm tofu and then a tiny bit of the soft, and then you kind of have those two competing textures. And so here I have some already crushed up Hodo soy tofu, and I'm going to spoon it out just because you can see it leaches out a bit of the liquid. All right, this is going well now. But the tofu scramble, sometimes, I like to do something like a little bit interesting, a little bit complex, adding different spices and seasonings. For this one, when food evokes memories like a Hollandaise might, or when you're kind of playing with people's memories with food, I generally like to keep it a bit more traditional as opposed to, showing off and show you that I can throw 32 spices into a Benedict. So with the tofu scramble, I just go really simple. It's just tofu, the black salt, nutritional yeast, and turmeric, and that's it. I just kind of want it to be something a bit more simple for this kind of preparation.
Where does the black salt come from, and what's the nutritional value?
That's a good question. It's very often like an East Indian ingredient, and so I'm assuming it sort of comes from somewhere around that area. I meant to Google it when I woke up at 5 this morning, so so I could expound my knowledge about black salt. But it is. So any salt that you get, there's not really a big difference between sea salt or any kind of salt beyond the minerals that are in it or the shape. Now, there's this really fancy flaky salt that costs $20 for a little box, and it's the exact same thing that you're going to find in a box of kosher salt. Now, why the big price difference? The only difference really is the shape. Those big crystals, those big pyramid crystals, those are much harder to produce than a box of kosher salt. And so, when people say, "Oh, this is sea salt," all salt is sea salt. If you get salt from a cave in the Midwest, well, it used to be an ocean, and so. Yeah, Hawaiian has red salt because of the clay that's in it. There's the black lava salt. And so it's very often the minerals that are in it. So with the black salt, I would assume that there's some types of sulfur, present where it happened. Maybe it's from an old sulfur vent or something. Do you two know by any chance? Yeah. It smells like farts a little bit. I used to work with a woman, from India. She's like, "Oh, we actually do call it fart salt." Do you know? Is that a...
I've never heard it.
No? You know the salt though. You worked with me. We did it. So. Anyways, yes, it's fart salt. And so, if you want to know the origins, create a story that you like.
It creates an eggy flavor.
Pardon me?
It creates a little bit of an eggy flavor.
Yeah, because of the sulfur. Did that ever make it back up here by any chance? Oh, cool. I'll take it up here. I can't. This is my border. Otherwise, you won't hear me. So, all right. So this is reducing pretty well right here for the Hollandaise. So next, Hollandaise is so much about having a nice lemony flavor. So I did add some acidic elements like the vinegar and the wine. Those are a little bit higher acid. But in the end, I often add a little bit of lemon juice. Now, can anyone tell me how I would know if I have to add lemon juice? Yes! See, he's a pro right there. Thank you, Shane. When I started out cooking, I always overthought things. Like, how do I know? How do I know? It's like, oh, taste the thing. Yes, that'll help you a lot. So, some wines are more acidic than others. So, you might not need it as much. I always start off a little low with the seasoning, like a little less salt than I might need, a little less of acidic elements, because you can always add more, but you can't subtract it so easily. All right. Hey, how I was just saying, oh, all vegan food has cashew in it. Guess what? Right here. So this is about 3/4 a cup cashew cream. And for this, I actually fermented it a little bit, just so it takes on a nice sort of sour quality. So a lot of times you blend cashew with Rejuvelac, which is probiotic, and then you can like let it sit out at room temperature, and it's going to actually ferment and take on a more complex flavor. You're growing a civilization in there. Whoops, civilization is complex. So, and fermented products, I think, are really important for vegan cooking because it introduces a level of complexity. And I think it has a lot of good health benefits because probiotic things are really good for your digestion, they're good for your health, and they taste very good. So this is white miso right here. I'm adding about 2 generous tablespoons. All right, what else I got to add? Tell me. Turmeric. I add turmeric and nutritional yeast. Now, turmeric, I'm not necessarily going so much for the flavor of it. I'm just pretty much going for the texture. A lot of times people project things, and so if it looks like Hollandaise, they're going to look for the similarities of it being to Hollandaise as opposed to, if it was green, they wouldn't know what to think. So this is nutritional yeast and turmeric right here. It's now starting to get a little chunky, and I think now it's time to go to the whisk. So here we go. So this is pretty nice and reduced here. But the secret ingredient, the thing that's going to make it a Hollandaise Jello, is the agar. And what's really important is I like to get all the agar together. It's asking for 2 teaspoons. I'll just put it all in one container because it's really important how you mix it in. If you just dump it in, wait a minute, and then you start stirring it, you're going to have a little lump of Jello in the middle, and it's not going to be evenly distributed. So here I'm going to kind of from up high, while still whisking, let it get in here like this. And it's good to let it, cook for just a minute to activate the agar. If you don't let it go for a little bit, now it wants to sputter on me. There you go. So just let it go for a tiny bit. And then we can start the tofu scramble. All right. So, and then an important step is you have to let it sit in the fridge for long enough to actually set. We'll see if it does it right here in front of our very eyes, like so much magic. It's very good to use one of these nice rubber spatulas. You don't want to waste anything. You put all that work into it. It took me a few minutes. Okay, there we go. So you can see it's pretty nice and thick. It's very hot, and as it turns cool, especially in a refrigerator, then it's going to really turn a lot more solid. So this is hot. Maybe I'll put that right there. Okay. This right here is a Arbequina olive oil. And I usually don't saute with it as much, but it's what I had at the tent, where we were selling food. So, a lot of times a pretty neutral oil, like canola oil can be good, or a lot of times there's like a sautéing oil, which is a blend of like almost, it sounds derogatory, but lower grade olive oil mixed with canola oil. So a lot of times it'll be like 75% canola oil, 25% olive oil, and that, olive oil, if it's really good, you're going to lose those good characteristics in the basic sauté. There's certain oils that are really good for finishing things. Like if you put this on the gazpacho that we had at our tent today, it's a nice finishing olive oil. But I kind of felt like I'd have another container. We'll be special for now. All right, so I'm going to let that get hot for a second. And maybe we should start frying seitan. How's that sound? Does anyone else have any questions so far? Yes, this one's a firm tofu. So at the restaurant, for brunch, I'll actually use 2 parts firm tofu, 1 part soft tofu. Like the soft, and then I'll sort of mix it up a little bit, just so that I still like it a little bit chunky very often, but then I also want it to be binded together, and so the soft tofu is pretty good for that. Oh, I can smell it getting hot already. That's the benefit of cooking with a good oil, I guess, is you can smell it really fast. Right, here we go. All right, should be good right about now. So I very often like to mix it up in a bowl first. Bowls are your friend. And with the tofu scramble, I just very often go by taste. I wrote down some particulars in there, but to be honest, I just sort of eyeball it very often. And everyone has different tastes. Taste is very subjective, so if you want to dump this whole thing in there, go for it. But chances are you probably don't want to. All right. Little bit of turmeric just for color. There we go. Did you know cooks use their hands a lot? If you go to that really fancy restaurant where there's like 30 components and it's like 2 feet tall, a lot of people have touched it probably. But hands are some of the best tools, I kind of feel like. So I'm definitely going to want to add a little bit more turmeric to this, because it should look like eggs, almost. A similar color. All right. Are you ready? I think it's ready. Let's go with a new glove here. Oh, they're not blue. I don't know if I can go on. If your hands ever get sweaty, they're hard to get on here. All right. So sometimes it's nice to have a little basin like this with hot water so you can reuse utensils. But if you're ever sautéing something, get the oil off first. It's only going to make things stick. All right. Changing my mind, let's heat up the tomatoes first. So our agar cake. Oh, you can see it's sort of turning jello-like already. Now, if you don't wait for it to get completely firm, when you blend it, it'll become it won't have the thickness, I've noticed. I'm not entirely certain why yet. So this is where the magic happens right here. Did anyone buy a Vitamix here? Toaster oven? Gas grill? Anything? All right. All right. So now it's time for me to tell you about blending. Oh, what happened? I think we lost power here. Oh, it did? Oh.
You were saying?
Hold on. I broke it already. Sorry, you don't get Hollandaise today, I guess. Yeah. Nope. There we go. Okay, I'm turning this off for 1 second.
On its own, I saw it.
All right, these are off. Maybe that'll help. Back in 1964. So you want to make sure you get it really, really smooth here. Look kind of like Hollandaise. It's a little thick, but when you heat it up, it'll change. So I think it's safe to turn these back on now. Maybe it'll work. Still working? Yes, it is. So, how am I going to know if this tastes good? Yeah. A little more fart. What's that? Just what?
What did you just put into it?
Oh, some of the black salt. I often add like a little less salt at the beginning, you know, just because it's easier to adjust it later. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Tomatoes are heating up. Getting there. When did you get here? Is Alfie with you? Oh. All right. Mira, so maybe it's time to count heads and find out how many of those little plates to set out. We're getting there. Ooh la la, Hollandaise. Has anyone used a blend tech before? They're good? I hear it's easier to scoop out. I did the vegan Iron Chef thing and won a blender. I'm doing it again this year. Oh, I'm supposed to plug this here. It's February 24th. Yes. Lisa Brooks Williams, Jay Estafa, Kevin Schuder. There's going to be knives clashing. There's going to be yelling. It's going to be, sweating, broken limbs. Okay, so I'm just basically warming this up, and you're going to see it get a bit thinner. It's really thick when it's cold. I smell these tomatoes here. Those are good. Maybe next we'll do English muffins. So if I had like a 6-top burner here, I could do everything at once. But I have these nice lids which will help keep it warm. All right. This stuff sputters like crazy too, so you got to kind of keep on it. Hey, look, Jell-O, almost. So the rest of the oil, I often emulsify into it. And it's good to start with a little drizzle at first. Add a little bit more and a little bit more. Too much and it'll completely separate. That's no good. And so when I make this, sometimes it's actually too thick as well. Like I overdid it. But that's okay, because you can always thin it out to get the right consistency. All right, English muffin time. So you want, most people have a toaster. I didn't bring the toaster. I don't know if they were selling them here. This needs to get a little warmer, but the texture is pretty good. I know it's a little thick, though, as you can see. So just a little bit of soy milk to thin it out. And so anything you like to give to it is up to you. I like to give it a little bit of avocado. Yeah, when we tempura fry it, we cut it into 6. Peel off the outside, into the dredge. This one's a little soft. Does anyone else have any other questions so far? Nice and griddled. All right. Seitan's next. So I generally use another pan for this, but, you know, this is our buffet range right here. So sometimes if it's a little bit smaller, I like to add 2 pieces per. So we'll get 4 pieces down. The pan's already hot. If it's not hot, you won't get a very good sear on it. Me? The Canadian did. I have a cook who's actually Canadian, and he's actually not even vegan. You know, he's like, but he's very interested in it. So I don't mind if he's not, so long as he's cooking it and he's doing a good job. So almost as a joke, I make the Canadian Seitan, and he's a little bit horrified by it, but he's a good character. All right. It doesn't take long. It's thin. But yeah, it's basically the Seitan recipe in the little recipe guide you probably got. Yep. All right. I'm pretty happy about this. It's actually pretty acidic, so I actually don't need to add much lemon at all. I actually don't need to add any. Time to assemble. Oh, thank you. I often use chopsticks for this. It's a holdover from the Japanese restaurant. I think they're one of the best tools after your hand, if you know how to use it. Okay? So, last night I thought, oh, I should probably give the people eating here a little taste. So let me fry up a little extra seitan for you. Let that get hot a minute longer. So to assemble it, now we have the tomatoes. See these nice, big, beautiful ones up here? Those I'd go on with next. The other ones I cut up so you can all have a little taste. So I'd put the tomatoes on next. That's for you guys. Then I'd move in next with the Tofu Scramble. So we actually, at the Citizen Fox Brunch, we actually have 2 different kinds of Benedicts. A lot of people have gluten-free requests, and so I started making a fried oyster mushroom Benedict. And so, you know, I mean, obviously the English muffin isn't gluten-free, but I'll substitute a soka cake for them. The stuff never stays on like an egg, so if it goes around a little bit, I never mind. Brunch is a rustic affair, generally. So then the avocado, I typically tempura fry. I didn't bring a little deep fryer today, but we're just going to put it on like such. Then, a nice healthy ladle of the Hollandaise. This is where you cover up the eggs that you spilled. Right here. So you can see it has a nice thick texture, but it's not too overly thick. A little bit of parsley. And of course you need the paprika. I mean, it's standard. Voila! Vegan Benedict. So now we get to make little samples for all of you. Mira, do you want to start with some of the tofu scramble here? Here, grab a towel. So how many people do we have here? Between 40 and 50? I want to ask you how many of you there are, but it doesn't work like that. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 52. Okay. Yeah. So I'd count out 52. Okay. So maybe, So, yeah, for this event, I obviously had to cook a lot. And so last night I got home at I got back to the restaurant at 9 o'clock. I'm like, oh, they probably all want to sample something. And so I don't have a whole lot to sample, but I did bring a lot of banh mi's for you. We had some leftover banh mi's, and I think we have a few more. So you each get to take one home. Yeah. So I'd probably give them each about yay, something like that. Okay. Got it? Oh, you got to. All right. Don't drop. All right. There you go. We lost a knob, and so what I'm going to do is... Oh, thank you. What I'm going to do is give you some tofu scramble with a bit of the seitan on top, some of the tomato confit, a little bit of the hollandaise, parsley, paprika. Yeah. So if you didn't get a recipe, every time I walked by here, there was 20 people. So I printed 32 copies. But we'll put it on is anyone not on Facebook nowadays? 2. Okay, give them your, maybe give them your copies, but if you...
You got the award.
I'm just coming over to somebody's house.
Yeah. So I'm going to be a real schemer and say, follow Citizen Fox on Facebook and we'll post a recipe. How about that? Well, thank you all for coming by. Wow, I made the time just right, too. Look at that. Okay, we got to get your food out, though.
Hey, I'd like to say something.
Yeah.
Kevin, you are the man. Citizen Fox
Oh,
is gonna
thank
do
you.
Well, we're so appreciative of all of our food vendors and speakers and presenters and members. I mean, everybody. We're a community, and this festival wouldn't happen if it weren't for you. We're an all-volunteer organization. We don't make money. We're all putting this on because it's a great event. It's fun. We learn. We get to try great food. And at times it can be really trying. Where's my wife? She's right back there. She'll tell you. Pat Leeds, give her a hand, everybody. It was amazing. Really amazing. Because we have full-time jobs, and I go to school as a theater practitioner, so it's been a lot. But this weekend was a lot of fun and definitely worth it. Watching everybody have fun and try food, it makes it all worth it, all that hard work. So thank you very much. Citizens,
Thank you,
that's about it. Thank you. October 1st and 2nd next year is tentatively what we're planning for World Veg Fest next year. And it's probably going to be here too. We're playing around with different ideas. And we're open to suggestions too. I mean, we're new at this. So we're trying to make it more dynamic and fun. And so if you have an idea, email me, greg@sfbs.org. Or you can go on our website, sfbs.org, and whatever, info or something. You'll find it anywhere.
You need a vegan fighting cage for those two. Take them on like the Thunderdome or something. That's all of it? Okay. Yeah, do you want to follow with this? A little bit of tomato then? Okay, just grab by the towel. Grab a spoon. Got it?